You weren't born to compete with the world. You were born to evolve through it. But somewhere along the way, we began measuring ourselves with borrowed rulers. We look at the lives of others, their speed, their style, their status, and quietly ask ourselves, why am I not there yet? But the truth is, comparison is a thief. It steals your peace, your focus, and your growth. The Stoics didn't believe in chasing others. They believed in refining the self, in measuring progress not by the distance to someone else's life, but by the distance you've come from your own past. And that simple shift changes everything, because once you stop looking sideways, you start moving forward. And when you do, the path becomes clearer, quieter, and infinitely more powerful. This episode isn't about ignoring others. It's about remembering that your true competition lives in the mirror. And the only question that matters is this: are you becoming a better version of who you were yesterday? 1. Growth is personal, not competitive. Real growth doesn't need an audience. It doesn't ask for permission, and it doesn't look the same for everyone. But we forget that. We're taught to measure progress like a race, to look to the left and right, compare paces, count milestones. We turn life into a scoreboard, where the person with the most visible wins is the one we assume is ahead. But the Stoic knows otherwise. Growth is not a race. It's a return to discipline, to clarity, to inner alignment. And no scoreboard can measure that. You see, personal growth is invisible at first. It happens in small, quiet decisions. The choice to speak calmly instead of lashing out. The decision to stay consistent even when no one is watching. The moment you recognize an old pattern rising, and this time you respond differently. Those aren't achievements you can post, but they're signs of evolution. And that evolution isn't validated by applause, it's validated by integrity. When you believe growth is competitive, you're constantly looking outward. You measure your worth based on how far someone else has gone. But the truth is, you don't know where they started. You don't know what they're carrying. You don't know how much of what they show is real. And if you build your path on that shaky foundation, you'll lose sight of what actually matters, your own transformation. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. And that includes our judgments about others. If you see someone rising and you feel inadequate, that's not about them. That's a signal to look inward, because true growth doesn't feel threatened by excellence, it's inspired by it. But only when you know who you are, only when you've defined what progress means for you. Growth is personal because your life is unique. Your past, your wounds, your temperament, your values, they all shape the kind of strength you're meant to develop. For some, growth means learning to speak up. For others, it means learning to stay silent. For some, it's slowing down. For others, it's finally beginning. There's no universal pace, no one-size-fits-all timeline. And the more you honor that, the less pressure you feel to catch up to a version of success that was never yours to begin with. But let's be honest, personal growth is hard to trust when no one sees it, when no one claps for your quiet effort, when it feels like you're working in the dark while others shine in the spotlight. That's where Stoic discipline comes in. It teaches you to value the process, not the recognition. To measure progress by your own standards, not by the shifting attention of the world. It's a mindset that says, even if no one sees it, I know I'm growing, and that's enough. So take your focus off the race, off the noise, off the illusion that someone else's timeline defines your worth, and ask yourself instead, am I better than I was last week? Am I thinking more clearly, acting more intentionally, living more in line with who I want to be? If the answer is yes, even just a little, then you're on the right path. Because in the end, growth isn't about being ahead of others. It's about being ahead of your former self. That's where peace begins, and that's where power lives. 2. Comparison robs presence and progress. Comparison is one of the most subtle thieves in life. It doesn't show up with warning signs. It doesn't scream or announce itself. It creeps in silently when you scroll through someone's highlight reel, when you hear their success story, when you look at where they are and quietly ask yourself, why am I not there yet? What am I doing wrong? But that single thought can spiral fast, because comparison isn't just about noticing someone else. It's about abandoning yourself. The moment you shift your gaze outward, you disconnect from your own path. Your focus drifts, your energy divides, and instead of being fully present in your life, your choices, your rhythm, your reality, you start living inside someone else's shadow. That's the real cost of comparison. It doesn't just make you feel small, it makes you forget what you're building. The Stoics warned against this trap, not because ambition is bad, but because misplaced attention weakens your will. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That's hard to swallow in a world where image is everything. But growth doesn't care about how it looks. It cares about whether it's real. And real progress happens when you stop watching others and start engaging fully with your own life. When you're caught in comparison, you measure progress by external markers: money, status, beauty, attention. But those things are temporary, fragile, and often fake. They're not rooted in wisdom or depth. They're shaped by trends, timing, and perception. And worse, they distract you from the internal wins, the ones that actually matter, like the strength it took to forgive someone, the courage to speak up, the discipline to stay consistent, even when you didn't feel motivated. These aren't always visible, but they are meaningful. Here's the paradox. The more you compare, the less progress you actually make. Because energy spent watching others is energy not invested in yourself. It weakens your presence. It dulls your awareness. You start chasing someone else's standard, and in doing so, you lose your own. It's like trying to run your race while constantly turning your head to see who's ahead. Eventually, you trip, you slow down, you stop moving altogether. Not because you weren't capable, but because you weren't focused. And presence matters, because growth only happens in the now, not in regret over the past, not in anxiety about where you should be, but in the exact choices you make today. Do you train your mind? Do you stay honest with yourself? Do you do the hard things, even when they don't feel rewarding yet? These are the moments that shape your trajectory, and they require your full attention. When you let go of comparison, you begin to feel lighter. You stop measuring your self-worth in someone else's metrics. You start defining success in your own terms. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's impact. Maybe it's becoming someone your younger self would be proud of. Whatever it is, it becomes real. It becomes yours. And because of that, it becomes sustainable. So the next time you find yourself looking sideways, pause, take a breath. Ask yourself, what do I actually want? Who do I want to become? And what is the next small step toward that person, right now, in this moment? Because progress isn't something you see in someone else's story. It's something you feel when you're deeply present in your own. 3. Track your past self, not others. You already have a blueprint for growth. It's not on someone else's timeline. It's not in their achievements, their accolades, or their pace. It's in your own story. The most honest, most accurate, most useful measurement of progress is simple. Who were you a year ago? A month ago? Last week? That's where the truth lives. That's where the change becomes visible, not by comparing across, but by comparing back. The Stoic doesn't measure his worth through competition. He doesn't ask, "Am I ahead of them?" He asks, "Am I ahead of who I used to be?" That's a humbler, yet far more powerful question, because it shifts the focus from envy to evaluation, from ego to integrity, and that shift is what keeps growth honest. Think about it. When you track your past self, you measure what actually matters. You see how you've responded to challenge, how you've changed your habits, how your thinking has matured. Maybe you used to react in anger, and now you pause. Maybe you used to seek approval, and now you act from principle. These changes may be quiet, but they are profound, and they deserve recognition. Too often we overlook our growth because it doesn't look dramatic. We expect transformation to come in leaps. But in reality, the most meaningful changes are gradual. They accumulate in layers. They build through small decisions, repeated with intention. You won't notice it day by day, but when you look back, the distance becomes clear. That's why journaling, reflection, and solitude matter, because memory is slippery. It forgets how lost you once felt, how reactive you once were, how uncertain your choices used to be. But when you take time to track your own evolution, you reclaim that perspective. You remember the weight you've carried and how much stronger you are for it. Marcus Aurelius, in his private writings, constantly reminded himself to act with reason, discipline, and purpose. Not because he was perfect, but because he knew how easy it was to drift. His journal wasn't a record of achievement. It was a mirror, a way to track the gap between who he was and who he aimed to be. That's the power of self-measurement. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you honest. And here's the key. Tracking your past self doesn't mean obsessing over mistakes. It doesn't mean beating yourself up for what you didn't do. It means recognizing growth without self-judgment. You can honor how far you've come without hating where you started. In fact, that's what builds real self-respect. Not pretending you've always been strong, but knowing that you've made yourself strong over time. When you live this way, progress becomes sustainable. You stop chasing superficial wins and start focusing on what actually moves the needle. You stop comparing journeys and start deepening your own. And suddenly you don't need motivation from the outside, because your own history becomes your proof. So take the time, look back, not to dwell, but to track. Who were you when you were overwhelmed, unsure, reactive? And who are you now? What do you handle differently? What do you see more clearly? What patterns have you broken? That's growth. Quiet, resilient, undeniable growth. And once you see it, you'll realize you never needed to look at anyone else. You had your compass all along. It was just pointed in the wrong direction. Turn it inward. That's where the journey begins. 4. Celebrate internal evolution. Not all victories make noise. Some are so quiet that only you will ever notice them. Like the moment you stayed calm when you used to explode. Like the morning you got up early without needing to justify it. Like the time you said no without guilt, or the night you finally chose rest over resentment. These aren't things people clap for, but they're evidence. Evidence that something inside you is changing, that you're evolving, that your discipline is growing deeper than your doubts. And yet, we rarely stop to celebrate these wins. Why? Because the world has trained us to only celebrate what others can see. We wait for the trophy, the promotion, the before and after photo. But the Stoic knows better. He celebrates the unseen. He honors the internal shift, because he understands that character is not built in the spotlight, it's built in silence. Seneca once said, "The reward of a good deed is to have done it," and the same goes for growth. The reward for becoming stronger is not recognition, it's the strength itself. The freedom that comes with knowing you no longer crumble in the places you used to break. The peace that comes from not needing applause to validate your evolution. That's something deeper than pride. That's self-respect. Celebrating internal change doesn't mean becoming complacent. It doesn't mean saying, "I've done enough." It means acknowledging that you're on the path, that progress is happening, that your effort is working. And that kind of recognition fuels the next step, because growth that goes unacknowledged eventually loses momentum. You don't need to broadcast it, but you do need to notice it. Take a moment to reflect. What are you handling now that would have overwhelmed you 6 months ago? What habits have you built, even if imperfectly, that were once unimaginable? What patterns have you begun to break? Not completely, but consciously. These aren't small things. They are signs of deep work. They are the invisible foundations of a stronger life. Most people ignore this progress because it doesn't come with instant rewards. But internal growth is like planting a tree. You won't see it rise in a day. But one day, when the roots are deep enough, it begins to bloom. And by then, you're not just growing. You've become unshakable. This is why solitude matters. It gives you the space to notice, to pause and say, "I'm not who I was. I've changed. I've improved." That small affirmation isn't arrogance, it's awareness. And awareness is the fuel for transformation. So celebrate, not loudly, but truthfully. Light a candle in your mind for the parts of yourself you've rebuilt, for the boundaries you've created, for the old wounds you no longer scratch, for the voice in your head that's slowly becoming kinder, wiser, stronger. And remember this, no one else needs to understand your growth. They don't need to approve of it. They don't need to see it. Because it's not for them, it's for you. It's the quiet joy of knowing you've done the work, of standing taller, even if no one notices, of becoming someone your past self would admire. That's worth celebrating, not once, but every day. 5. Everyone walks a different path. It sounds simple, even obvious. But this truth, everyone walks a different path, is one of the most freeing and most difficult things to truly accept. Because deep down, we want to believe there's one way to succeed, one timeline, one formula. We look around, and when someone else seems to be ahead, we assume we've fallen behind. But what if there's no such thing as ahead? What if life is not a race but a route, unique to each of us, unfolding in ways we often can't predict or fully understand? The Stoics remind us, we are not meant to follow identical scripts. We are meant to live with purpose, yes, but also with presence. And presence means recognizing the distinct rhythm of your own life, the pace, the detours, the seasons. It means acknowledging that your timing, your tests, your lessons, they're tailored to you. They're not mistakes. They're part of your becoming. It's easy to compare when someone else seems to be winning. You see them thriving, achieving, moving forward, and your mind whispers, "What's wrong with me?" But that question assumes you're behind, when in truth, you're just walking a different road. Maybe you're not at the building stage. You're at the healing stage. Maybe your lessons are internal, not visible. Maybe your growth is in foundation, not decoration. And that matters just as much, sometimes more. There's a quote from Epictetus that captures this. If you want to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. Don't wish to seem knowledgeable. And if some regard you as important, distrust yourself. Why? Because the Stoic path isn't about looking impressive. It's about becoming solid. And becoming solid takes time. It doesn't always look like progress. But it is. When you honor the uniqueness of your path, you stop rushing. You stop forcing things to happen according to someone else's timeline. You start listening instead, listening to your own readiness, your own intuition, your own experience. That's when decisions become clearer. That's when growth becomes sustainable. But this requires deep trust. Trust that your delays aren't failures. Trust that your setbacks aren't punishments. Trust that life is unfolding for you, not against you, even when it moves slower than you hoped. Especially then. Solitude helps with this. It removes the background noise of other people's journeys. It lets you reconnect to your own. You stop measuring by likes, salaries, milestones. You start measuring by peace, clarity, alignment. You start asking better questions. Am I living honestly? Am I aligned with what I say I value? Am I becoming the kind of person I respect? These are questions that lead somewhere real. So the next time you feel behind, pause. Look at your own story, not theirs. Look at the trials you've faced, the burdens you've carried, the inner victories you've won that no one knows about. That is not being behind. That is walking deeply, honestly, quietly forward. Remember, your path doesn't need to look like anyone else's. It just needs to be yours. Walk it with patience. Walk it with pride. 6. Be inspired, not intimidated. There's a fine line between admiration and insecurity. You see someone succeeding, confident, disciplined, seemingly in control, and a part of you feels drawn to it. You admire their energy, their direction, their presence. But if you're not careful, that admiration can turn on you. Instead of being fuel, it becomes a mirror reflecting your doubts. Instead of being inspired, you feel small. You start to think, why can't I be like that? What's wrong with me? And just like that, inspiration becomes intimidation. But the Stoic knows how to stop that spiral, because he's trained his mind to separate observation from self-judgment. He can look at someone else's light without feeling dimmed. He can admire without comparing. That's the key. Inspiration should lift you, not crush you. It should awaken what's possible, not shame what hasn't happened yet. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." That mindset alone reframes everything, because once you understand that life isn't about beating others, it's about becoming yourself, you start using what you admire to build, not to belittle. Ask yourself, when you see someone thriving, what do you focus on? Is it their result or their process, their status or their struggle? Because behind every person who seems ahead is a story you don't see, pain you don't feel, effort you weren't there for. And once you realize that, admiration becomes honest. You stop imagining that they had it easier. You start respecting how they earned it. That's the kind of inspiration that fuels growth. It says, if they did it, I can too, but in my own way, on my own terms. You're not here to copy someone else's formula. You're here to find your own rhythm. Let their discipline remind you of yours. Let their clarity remind you what you need to reclaim. Let their strength remind you that you're still building yours. And that's okay. It's easy to be intimidated when you only measure what's visible, but the Stoic looks deeper. He knows that real strength doesn't always show. That calm is often born from chaos. That wisdom is earned through failure. So instead of asking, "Why am I not there yet?" ask, "What can I learn from them that helps me walk my path better?" That question keeps you grounded. It keeps you out of shame and in alignment. Solitude helps you make this shift. When you step away from the crowd, you begin to see clearly again. You remember that your journey isn't less valid just because it looks different. You realize that inspiration is not a threat. It's a reminder. It's a spark. It's a sign that you're drawn to something you were always capable of becoming. So admire freely. Celebrate others. Let their wins lift your spirit, not because you need to match them, but because you recognize what's possible, and then return to your lane. Do the work. Stay focused. Keep becoming. Because one day, someone will look at you, not with jealousy, but with awe, and say, "They didn't compete. They created." That's the kind of presence you're building, one that doesn't intimidate others, but inspires them the way you were once inspired. 7. Focus on consistent small improvements. It's tempting to chase big breakthroughs. We imagine transformation as something sudden, a dramatic shift, a powerful moment, a complete change overnight. But real growth rarely looks like that. It's quieter, slower, less impressive at first glance. The Stoic doesn't seek change through intensity. He seeks it through consistency. Not because he lacks ambition, but because he understands the truth. The most powerful transformation comes from small steps, repeated with purpose. One choice at a time, one correction, one habit, one honest moment where you catch yourself slipping into old patterns and choose differently. That's progress. It doesn't always feel exciting. In fact, it can feel boring, unrewarding, like you're moving too slowly. But slow progress is still progress. And unlike fast, unsustainable bursts, it lasts. Epictetus said, "No great thing is created suddenly. That includes you, your discipline, your clarity, your mindset. These are not switches to flip, they're fires to tend. And fires don't roar instantly. They grow with care, with attention, with commitment. If you're waiting for a perfect moment to change everything, you're missing the power of right now. Because every day you're building something. The question is, what? Focusing on small improvements brings you back to the present. You stop chasing outcomes and you start owning your effort. You stop waiting to feel ready and you start moving forward anyway. And that shift, from waiting to working, is the moment growth becomes real. But here's what makes this so difficult. We often don't believe small steps are enough. We think if it doesn't feel like a breakthrough, it doesn't count. But that's a lie. The person who reads 2 pages a day is closer to finishing a book than the one who plans to read 100 and never starts. The person who meditates for 5 minutes a day is more centered than the one who waits for the perfect retreat. The person who reflects in solitude every evening is growing faster than the one who spends hours talking but never listening inward. Consistency is what compounds, it's what builds character, and it's what turns average actions into extraordinary outcomes over time. The Stoic doesn't chase motivation, he trains habit. He doesn't seek perfection, he strengthens alignment. He knows that every small intentional act, no matter how simple, echoes forward. So don't underestimate what you're doing just because it's quiet. Don't dismiss your progress because it doesn't go viral. Ask yourself instead, am I better than I was yesterday? Did I show up today with a little more clarity, a little more control, a little more courage? If the answer is yes, even by a fraction, that's enough. That's movement. This mindset also frees you from burnout. You stop trying to do everything at once. You start trusting the process. And in that trust, something powerful happens. You gain momentum. You start stacking wins. You start building a rhythm that doesn't depend on emotion, but on commitment. That's what makes change sustainable. That's what makes you unshakable. So take the pressure off. Stop waiting for the big leap. Start showing up for the small step. Every choice is a vote for the person you're becoming. And one day, you'll look back and realize you didn't just change. You transformed, not through force, but through quiet, daily courage. 8. Avoid envy. Embrace gratitude. Envy doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It sneaks in quietly, disguised as curiosity. You see someone achieving something you want, and instead of feeling inspired, you feel a tightness in your chest, a silent comparison, a subtle question: why not me? Why them? What am I missing? It's easy to pretend that emotion doesn't exist, to brush it off. But the Stoic confronts it, not with shame, but with understanding, because envy, left unchecked, will rot your spirit from the inside out. It won't just cloud your focus, it will poison your peace. But here's the truth most people miss. Envy isn't really about the other person. It's about disconnection from yourself. It's a signal that you've lost sight of what you have, what you've built, and what you're capable of becoming. It turns your gaze outward and keeps it there, fixated on someone else's rewards, while your own progress quietly fades from view. Gratitude, on the other hand, returns your gaze inward. It grounds you. It sharpens your perspective. It says, I may not have what they have, but I have what I need to begin. I have tools. I have time. I have breath. I have a mind that's learning and a spirit that hasn't given up. And when you start from that place, everything changes, not just your mindset, but your actions. Gratitude doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful, because it puts you in touch with what's real. Marcus Aurelius, in the midst of war and political pressure, wrote about gratitude often, not because his life was easy, but because he understood that focusing on what he lacked would only weaken him. So he chose to reflect on what he had: his mind, his reason, his ability to respond with virtue. That's the Stoic practice, not pretending life is perfect, but refusing to let what's missing blind you to what's present. Envy is loud because the world is loud. We are constantly shown people's successes, filtered, curated, glorified, and if you're not grounded, you'll believe that what they show is what they are. But most of what you see is performance. Most of what you admire is only half the story. And when you remember that, you stop reaching for someone else's life. You start living your own. Gratitude doesn't silence ambition. It purifies it. It turns your goals from "I want what they have" to "I want to honor what I've been given." That's a deeper fire, one that lasts, one that doesn't burn out the moment someone else wins. The practice is simple, but not easy. Every time you feel the pull of envy, pause. Don't fight it blindly. Acknowledge it. Then redirect your focus. Ask yourself, what have I already overcome? What qualities have I built through effort and pain? What moments of clarity, courage, or discipline have shaped me into who I am? These aren't small things. They're the foundation of everything you're becoming. Solitude sharpens this practice. In the quiet, you can see envy for what it is: a distraction, a lie that says someone else's path is more important than your own. But gratitude cuts through that lie. It reminds you that your journey, no matter how slow or invisible, is sacred. It matters, and it's enough. So choose gratitude, not just as a feeling, but as a focus. Let it pull you back into your own lane. Let it lift the weight of comparison from your shoulders. And let it remind you, you are not behind. You are becoming. 9. You are your only true standard. Most of us grew up being measured, graded in school, ranked in sports, compared to siblings, peers, colleagues. And somewhere along the way, we internalized a dangerous idea that our worth is relative, that it depends on how we stack up against others. But the Stoic rejects that scale entirely. He doesn't ask, am I better than him, or am I doing more than her? He asks, am I living in alignment with my own values? That is the only standard that matters. Because external standards shift. What's admired today is forgotten tomorrow. What earns you praise in one group might invite criticism in another. But your internal standard, your principles, your discipline, your integrity, that's something you can carry with you no matter where you go, and it never goes out of style. Epictetus taught that we should focus not on things outside our control, but on our character, our choices, our actions, our responses. When you measure yourself by anything else, money, attention, validation, you give away your peace. You become a puppet to approval. But when you measure yourself by your own standard, you reclaim control. You define success on your own terms. And that's where real confidence begins. Ask yourself, what does excellence look like for me? Not perfection, not applause, but excellence, a quiet, consistent striving to be better than you were, based on your own beliefs, not the world's opinions. Maybe it means showing up when no one expects you to. Maybe it means staying kind when it would be easier to lash out. Maybe it means being honest with yourself when it would feel safer to lie. These aren't flashy things, but they are real, and they are rare. The danger of using others as your measuring stick is that it blinds you to your own progress. You might be moving forward, healing, learning, growing, but if someone else seems to be moving faster, you convince yourself you're failing. That's the tragedy of comparison. It makes you forget how far you've come just because someone else is farther. But your story is yours alone. Your challenges, your scars, your resilience. It's a path no one else has walked. So why use someone else's map? Why let their pace dictate your peace? The Stoic knows that the mind can drift, that it loves to compare, to judge, to chase. So he brings it back again and again to this question. What kind of person am I becoming? That question strips away the noise. It forces you inward. It asks for honesty, and it gives you power. Because you're no longer chasing a moving target. You're building something solid, something that belongs to you. And here's the truth. When you live by your own standard, you don't need constant feedback. You don't need to prove anything. You become self-directed, self-respecting, grounded. Your victories may be invisible to others, but they're undeniable to you, and that's enough. So let go of the scoreboard, release the urge to impress, reclaim your focus, set your own standard, and live by it, quietly, relentlessly, with clarity. Because in the end, you won't be judged by how much louder you were, but by how true you stayed to yourself. 10. Master your own trajectory. The most powerful life isn't the one that moves the fastest. It's the one that moves with intention, the one that doesn't get blown off course by opinions, trends, or temporary emotions. The one that stays true to its direction, even when the world tries to pull it in every other way. That's what it means to master your trajectory, not to control every outcome, but to choose your path and walk it deliberately. The Stoic doesn't try to predict every twist or prevent every storm. He knows life is unpredictable, but what he controls is how he moves through it. His decisions are rooted in principle, not pressure. His momentum isn't based on speed, but on alignment. He doesn't ask, "Where should I be by now?" He asks, "Am I moving in the right direction, with discipline, with clarity, with purpose?" That's mastery, not perfection, not certainty, but clarity in the face of uncertainty. It's waking up each day with the awareness that every action is a brick, every thought is a tool, every habit is a vote for the life you're building. And when you live that way, your path doesn't need to match anyone else's, because it's built for you. You see, most people drift, not because they're lazy, but because they've never been taught how to steer. They follow what's loud, what's popular, what's easy. They start down a road, then look sideways and panic. Maybe I should be doing what he's doing. Maybe I'm behind. Maybe I chose wrong. And in that moment of doubt, they abandon their course. They start over, again and again. But the Stoic doesn't drift, not because he always knows the destination, but because he knows his values. And values are stronger than emotion. They don't change with the weather. They're the compass that keeps you aligned when the map is unclear. Mastering your trajectory means stepping back from urgency. It means turning down the noise. It means looking at the long arc of your life and asking, "Am I becoming someone I respect? Are my actions today contributing to the person I want to be 5 years from now?" If the answer is yes, even in a small way, keep going. That's progress. That's alignment. That's the path. And here's what most people don't realize. When you truly master your path, you don't need to prove it. You don't need validation or applause or even understanding. You carry a quiet confidence that can't be shaken by someone else's opinion, because you're not living their life, you're living yours. Solitude plays a role here too. It clears the fog, it helps you strip away distractions and return to what matters. In silence you remember, you're not here to move fast, you're here to move true. Every decision you make in alignment with your values is a declaration. I know where I'm headed, and I don't need to chase anyone to get there. So take the wheel, not out of fear, not out of competition, but out of respect. Respect for the one life you've been given, respect for the mind you've been trusted to shape, and most of all, respect for the kind of person you're choosing to become, step by step, thought by thought, quietly, relentlessly, with intention, because that's what it means to master your trajectory. It's not about arrival, it's about direction. And the most powerful direction is the one you choose, not the one you inherit. In the end, it all comes back to one quiet truth. Your only true competition is the person you were yesterday. Not the stranger on a screen, not the colleague down the hall, not the version of success that someone else defined for you. Just you and the path you're walking. The Stoic reminds us that progress is not found in comparison, but in consistency. That strength is not measured in applause, but in alignment. That evolution doesn't need to be loud to be real. Each time you choose presence over pressure, each time you measure growth by your own standards instead of someone else's, you reclaim your power. You begin to move not faster, but truer. You stop chasing timelines that were never meant for you, and you begin to craft a life that is rooted in who you are, not who you're told to be. You don't need to prove your pace. You don't need to justify your direction. You just need to keep becoming, quietly, intentionally, relentlessly. Growth isn't about dramatic reinvention. It's about subtle refinement. One thought at a time, one choice at a time, one small win at a time. So return to your path, trust its rhythm. Measure your success not by where you are, but by how far you've come. And know this, the person you're becoming through that quiet, disciplined effort, that person is already enough. Not because they've arrived, but because they've chosen to walk with purpose. Let others run their race. Let the world make its noise. You, stay steady, stay focused, stay aligned, because that still, honest journey back to yourself, that's where real power begins.